Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I think this post sort of highlights how the world necessarily isn't black and white and that there are many shades of grey in between. I understand where both parties are coming from here, however I do think one party did not handle it the right way. If you do enjoy this story, please give it a like. Anyway, onto the story. My husband, a 30-year-old male, became the legal guardian to his sister's daughter, a 17-year-old female, about 2 months ago. She lost her single mom last year. My in-laws took her in, but they were too old. That was when my husband became her legal guardian despite my concerns. He told me that he would take care of her completely. We got married a year ago, after 15 years of dating. I had a very successful career in a physically and mentally demanding field. I had to travel a lot. We wanted to start a family and I agreed to be a stay-at-home mom. I quit my job a few months into marriage when I got pregnant. Sadly, I lost the baby. Then his sister died and everything is on hold. In the meantime, I took a part-time job in a related field which allows remote work so that I'm not bored out of my mind. My sister-in-law was a nurse. She quit her job to take care of her daughter full-time. Her daughter has a variety of issues including nonverbal autism, a series of developmental disorders like dyslexia, and severe sensory issues. My husband said that he does most of the work, but he doesn't. Since I'm working from home part-time, most of the caretaking falls to me. She gets angry and has meltdowns all the time. She doesn't like the food that I make, and most of the time she ends up throwing the food at the floor or at me. I'm at my wit's end, and it is just so emotionally exhausting. Around December 15th, my husband was working late and asked me to take care of dinner. She's very picky about food. The slightest change in texture or taste from what she's used to can cause a huge meltdown. She threw the plate at my feet and I ended up bleeding. At that point, I called my husband and asked him to come home as soon as possible. He said that he wouldn't be able to. I went up to my room and I told him that I'm not dealing with this anymore. He came hours later and she was still crying. He was absolutely furious at me. He called me heartless and irresponsible. I told him that I had had enough of both of their ungrateful behavior, and I told him that I was going to my mom's and that I wouldn't be back until New Year's. He panicked and tried to apologize, but I left. He called me every day asking me to come back. I finally came back and he told me that my stunt had forced him to take all his available leaves to stay home with her. He told me that he was glad I was back. I told him that I'd contacted my former company and had gotten my old job back and that it starts next Monday. It's in office and requires a lot of travel. He asked me who was supposed to stay at home as she can't be left alone. He has no more leaves and full-time caretakers are way too expensive. I told him he promised me that he would take care of everything when he became her guardian and that it was his problem. As you can guess, my family supports me and his family thinks that I'm being extremely selfish. So I'm just asking judgment from impartial strangers. Am I the a-hole in this situation? Not the a-hole. You expressed concern about taking on the responsibility in caring for a child with special needs. Not everyone is equipped to take on a special needs child, and I feel for you. I also feel for your husband who's trying to do the right thing out of guilt. It's really not fair to you for getting dumped on and expected to give up your life and dreams. I'd put my foot down and communicate that you did not sign up for this. I would have a serious discussion with your husband about other options in caring for this child. It's a sad situation to be in for you all. Not the a-hole for standing on your ground and refusing to let your husband continue to use you as a free caregiver for his special needs niece. That being said, as a mom of a nonverbal autistic child, you may have been a little over the line by lumping the poor girl in with his ungrateful behind. She is nonverbal and therefore unable to properly communicate what is upsetting her. It is extremely difficult to care for an individual with such high needs. We always have to make 2 separate meals to ensure that my son has something he will eat while the rest of the family will eat a different meal. Provided that there are simple meals that she likes, you may have exacerbated the situation by making her something you weren't sure she would eat instead of something you knew she would eat. A person like my son, and sounds like your husband's niece as well, would rather starve than eat something that they can't handle the texture, taste, or color of. And since they're nonverbal, they show their disdain in a way they know, such as physically. I don't think it's fair to paint her as ungrateful. This is from a retired special educations teacher. Not the a-hole for starters, but there's a lot to unpack here. OP, I know that you're doing the best for your husband's niece, but she needs far more specialized care than you're able to give her. Please, please, please contact a local agency that works with autistic individuals, schedule and keep an appointment with them, and find all that you can about day services and small group home placements for her. There are more services than ever now for autistic individuals. Recreation, ADL, which is activities of daily living, training, and residences structured to meet their particular needs. Many people take a severely disabled family member into their home with the very best of intentions, but they don't think far enough ahead. What will happen when you and your husband are 80 years old, 90 or over? Will you still be expected to do all the physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting care for his niece? What if she outlives the both of you? What will happen to her then? These are considerations that you must take into account if you're to help her at all. Your husband, understandably, is thinking about this emotionally and expecting you to do all the work as well. I notice not an unusual dynamic in these cases. But you both do need to sit down and consider this rationally if you're not to implode your marriage and, ironically, leave your husband's niece in a far worse situation than she is now. Lots of people messaged me asking for an update, so here goes. I wish I could say that things got better. My husband took a few days off to interview special needs nannies and caretakers. He ended up finding a good and experienced person to take on the job. He hired her for 9 to 6 during weekdays. One day, she ended up saying that she could not make it for a couple of days due to an emergency. My husband had a meeting that he couldn't miss out on and asked me to look after his niece for the day. I refused, and he took my car keys while I was getting ready and left before I noticed, so that I could not go to work. I grew up with a narcissistic, gaslighting father who did stuff like this all the time. I told him to come back in 1 hour or I would call CPS, and once they get here, I'll call a cab and go to work. He ended up driving back, and this turned into a big fight. I told him that if he does this again, I'll walk out and never look back. He apologized and said that he was just desperate. The worst happened 2 days ago. I needed to travel for a couple of weeks for work, and I couldn't find my passport. I'm a very organized person, and I know that I did not misplace it. I ended up calling the non-emergency helpline. They ransacked the house and found the passports hidden in his gym bag. It's a crime to steal passports, and they asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said no. Another fight. He told me that he needed me at home that weekend due to a social welfare visit, and he knew that I would not stay even if he asked me. I kicked them both out of my house, and I told him that I would call the police if he came near me again. My house is a premarital asset, thank God for that. I told him that I would be filing for divorce. The welfare visit was horrible, as neither of them were living there when the worker showed up, and the social worker also knew about the recent call to the non-emergency helpline. So all in all, she was not impressed with what he was saying. He came by 2 days ago. He told me that they ended up moving in with his parents. They own and live in a 2-bedroom apartment that doesn't qualify according to welfare norms. He ended up asking me for another chance. He asked if I could consider letting him and the niece stay until they figured it out, or she would just go to state's care. He told me that there is no way he could afford rent and a career and begged me. I told him that I could never forgive him for what he had done. He knew my past with my father, and he still went ahead and did it. He suggested that they could move in and that we could work on this at couples counseling. I told him that I could never trust him again and that it was over. He asked me if he could get his parents to take in the niece or even relinquish her care to the state if I would give him another chance. I think months' worth of anger finally burst that day. I told him that even though it may appear as if the problem between us is the niece, it was actually him. He didn't ask me before taking her in. He did nothing to help. He waved my concerns away whenever I felt burnt out. He took on a responsibility without consulting me and dumped everything on me. He chose to take my keys. He chose to hide my passport. I told him things may have been different. Him, his niece, and I may have adapted and become a family if he hadn't made the wrong choices at my expense at every turn. I told him to get out of my house, it was over, and I never wanted to see them again. I still don't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. I know people wanted some sort of happy ending, but it is what it is. I still have not started divorce proceedings yet, but I will soon. For now, I'm taking a break, as it has been a very emotional and draining couple of weeks. So guys, what did you think about this? Honestly, it was very complicated. Before I say anything, can we just all agree that in no way, shape, or form was the niece to blame for anything that happened here? I've mentioned caregivers in the past before in some of my videos, and the sheer amount of responsibility that they have is just astounding, and the amount of courage that it takes to be a caregiver is amazing. And I think that it's okay if individuals realize that they have too much of a burden on their shoulders, as OP did. I do think it might have worked out, but the husband did not handle it well. He just put all of the responsibility on OP and then expected her to handle it without necessarily contributing an equal amount. The optimist in me likes to believe that they would have turned out okay if they had communicated better and had a healthier dynamic. And by they, I mean OP and her husband. Anyhow, that's all from me for today. I hope that you enjoyed this story. If you do, please give it a like and please subscribe to my channel for more stories from Reddit with updates.